and we're returned back to the Forms Designer. Now, only one real visual change here. You can see the grid, and this helps us to align things. Now, if this grid is too small for you, you can obviously set the blocks to be slightly bigger if you want to. And then what we want to do is open a new form or a new MDI frame. Remember the differences between the two. If you're going to use MDI frame, then you'll need to create the MDI frame and then your children separately. What I'm going to do is just to create a new form, and then we're presented with the new form dialog, which is prompting us for a data source. Let's just have a quick look at these prompts before we go any further. The data source lists all of the data sources available to us within this OpenInsight application. I've just got the option for no table or OpenInsight tables. If you had configured this to use SQL Server, Lotus Notes, Oracle, or any ODBC data sources, then they would be displayed here. I'm just going to select OpenInsight tables for now. This then prompts us with a list of data tables available to this form from within the selected data source. And what I want to use is the MP patient table, so I'll just double click that now. Columns list the column names selected and added by the developer for use on this form. So in here you can add these in a number of different ways. I can simply double click hospital number and it appears in the edit line below, or I could click on surname and add, or I could pick several. So if I was to do forenames and title using the shift button and then add, then that will drop those multiple lines in there for us. So in this particular edit table, the column name is simply the name of the column from the dictionary, and the control type, now OpenInsight assumes the control type is required, and it will try and guess the control type that you particularly want, and it's based on certain rules. For instance, it will automatically choose an edit line for our hospital number as it's a single line entry, and if I go ahead and include the address, for instance, it will add that as an edit table for a multi-value control. The add button just simply adds the rows in here, and the remove button is used to remove them. There is a style sheet option as well. Now this button enables you to apply a style sheet to this form that we're working on. We're not going to be using style sheets within this lesson, so we won't worry about that for the moment. Now it's dropped title in as an edit line. What I might want to do a little bit later is change that so I give people a little list to pick from. So if I double click the cell here, edit line, and I'll change that to a combo box just by double clicking it, and then we can populate that combo box later on. I'm just going to go ahead and select the other columns in our database here, and we'll just simply add those in. Now if you come up to the address, remember I mentioned a moment ago, because that's a multi-value field and it knows it's going to have multiple lines, it's set that as an edit table, so we can put multiple lines in the edit table, which is great. Gender is wrong though. We don't really want an edit line for that because it's only going to be male, female or unknown, so we might as well use a radio button for that because that's going to be exclusive. And comments, again, we might want to have multiple lines in there of data, so we'll change that to a standard edit box for the moment, and the approximate age being an edit line I'm quite happy with. Once we're finished, we can click OK, and our selections are made and the screen closes to the new form window, and it kindly creates a new form for us and immediately goes into edit mode. It's a good job it goes into edit mode, because at the moment the default form created is not ideal in its current appearance. It does however provide us with our controls and labels on the form, which we simply then need to rearrange to suit. You'll notice that the OpenInsight has also included a default menu structure for us up here. This includes some of the more common menu requirements from an average window or form. This menu bar will be modified later to include some additional items, so we'll just leave it alone for the moment. The toolbar is a floating window showing the full set of controls available, and it can easily be moved out of the way by clicking on the top and dragging it with the mouse button depressed, and I usually just have that over the right hand side just out of the way. At this stage the form has not been saved and it does not exist in the repository, and this is signified by the control name being untitled. at the top of the window here. Don't be confused by untitled on the actual window itself, which is the text. This is the control name that we're interested in, and the fact it's untitled lets us know that it's not been saved. So that's a nice little visual indicator. Now we need to think a little bit about screen resolutions, and I don't particularly like my window being that wide. So for the moment I'm just going to drag this in just a small amount. And we'll just drag this down a little bit. So this will be the area that we are working on. You might have some predefined standards for window sizes, etc. If you do, then you'll just need to move that, move these slide bars around. And you'll notice here that the values change. So you can actually set this to be exact. So I could set that to be 500 if I wanted to, just by dragging that around until I get it in the right place. Now these controls, I think we'll prefer to have them over slightly. So what I can do is just drag through them all, and that selects all of them. You know they're selected because you've got this little dotted line around them. And then I can just use the arrow keys just to move them over a little bit. It gives me a little bit more room at the side here. Click on the form anywhere to deselect them. Hospital number is a little bit long. That's just going to be maybe a 5-digit number, so we'll just reduce that. And the title is probably going to be quite small as well. So if we do shift and click, you'll notice now that we have selected a number of controls. It looks like we've selected 4 controls there, but the controls that we've selected are highlighted with this dotted line around the edge. So if I go into Tools, Size Equally, we get the option to maximize the height or set it to the maximum height, the minimum height, maximum width and minimum width, and we've got the shortcuts here, so Control I would have done this for us. I can just click on to minimum width, and that will just reduce those two down. It hasn't reduced the surname and the forenames because I hadn't actually selected those, even though the box was around them. So the surname will actually reduce that down as well a little bit, and we'll select the forenames, Control I to size those the same. The date of birth, again, that's quite long. Now we'll probably do that in number format. So if I do Shift and hospital number and Control I, then that's resized that to be the same size as well. That's given us some space here. So let's just bring these controls over just by selecting them and dragging and dropping. A little bit too far because we're in the way over there, but just bring this out. And what we'll do is we'll just make these a little bit smaller at the moment. So select all of those, Control I again. Just bring our window in a little bit. Now you can spend a long time just moving the controls around on the form. I'm not going to spend too much time in the video doing this. I'm going to tidy this up myself in a moment. But you can see just by clicking and dragging that you can move components around quite nicely. You can resize them using the drag buttons. Now it's interesting to note here that I would want to have my labels aligned. So I can select them all, and if I do a Control Left, or I could go into Tools and Align, and there are different alignments: left, right, top, bottom. I can align them centrally, either vertically center or horizontal center, and I can space and size them equally. So use these controls to make sure that everything is aligned up. For instance, in here we just drag through these and Control Left, and I think what we'll also do is we'll just use the arrow keys to move them over a little bit more.